All right, the recording's going. Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you're at throughout the world when you see this, or by the time you see this. Trestleboard Talks is back. It's been a while. It's been crazy for Trey. It's been crazy for myself. But we're back. Let's just kind of listen to this for a little bit, get us started.
We the lost symbol speaking cryptic codes, ancient wisdom valuable like gifts of gold. I embark on life, my path is all math. I understand the codes these hackers can't crack. I understand the folks expect me to fold. Community control or violate parole. I won't fail, but a lot of men will. I'm iconic in the field like Solomon's seal. It's just the intro. Allow my flow time to sink into the tempo. Freemason, freelancer, we faster. Big contracts, big contractors, built pyramids, period. We masters, no.
Masters, we're master masons. So again, good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you are throughout the world. This is our role is Trey, excuse me, back again as Trestleboard Talks. Just a disclaimer before we start. Our views are our views alone. By no way are they indicative of what the Grand Lodge is thinking or has put out publicly and are in a written fashion, so to speak, or even privately for that matter. So, Trey, what's up, man?
My brother, man, it's been a minute. It's been a minute. Too long.
We back. Let's catch up. Let's kick it.
Yeah, man. So, where to begin? Let's talk about the traveling. Have you been doing any lately?
I'll go to St. Louis next week.
Oh, nice.
For a major conference and encampment. That's about it until we go to Sacramento.
What's in? Oh yeah, that's right. Grand Sessions in Sacramento. That's right. I almost forgot. That's in a couple weeks too. Yeah, looking forward to that too. It's always a good time to get all the brothers together and the families and everything. Really enjoy it. At least the last two I've attended. They've been pretty good. Like all the, not necessarily the I won't call it theatrics, but all the activities that go on outside, just the fellowship, and really makes it enjoyable. Yeah. St. Louis, there was a brother, I remember when I went to Boston, I met a couple of brothers from St. Louis, and they spoke highly of it. Them guys were definitely some upright brothers, showed all of the expected hospitality and some. It was a good time meeting those brothers from St.
I'll be there for the Grand Encampment of the United States in the Bahamas for the Knights Templar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'll be representing our state for that as the head of our state and looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So the book just dropped, 40 Miles of Lecture Series. So that'll be one of the highlights that while we're there. I'll also be doing a lecture for the companions there, the Mark Master degree, the same one that you and Orlando did, but I kind of put a little spin, added some stuff. So we'll be going over that degree with those brothers. And then, it's about 5 Black authors that'll be there. So we'll be setting up our books and talking about our books and we'll sell a few books just to get it out there. It should be a good time. Be there for about 4 days.
Y'all definitely, put in the work on on publishing. So the book's already out. It's already available.
The book is on Amazon right now, 40 Miles of Lecture Series. Yeah, it just came out. Yeah, it came out.
I'll have to cop that one.
Yeah, it came out early June.
Yeah, I'm a collector for sure. And that was who all was on that one as far as writing?
Just Charles and myself.
Okay, so it's gonna be a deep one, deep one.
Yeah, so we went off the rails on this one. It was it's the history of the Knights Templars.
Yeah,
where they came from. We brought it current day, and then the second half of the book, because I think the book's 70, 80 pages somewhere. It's a quick read, but
okay.
We did go off the deep end on this one a little bit.
Yeah.
We added some timelines in there. We added a lot of historical accounts. And the second half of that book is all lectures by Charles. So I started off with a historical account, went through some of the degrees.
Yeah.
And then he came in with the lectures, and we gave meanings of the number 40, biblical meanings of the number 40. I think 3 or 4 pages of just biblical meanings of the number 40, just as an example. So yeah, we went out the rails on that one.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to reading that one. They're always it's always good read. Always leave like contemplating, like, man, I didn't think about it, from that perspective, and always enjoy reading y'all's work. Yeah, man. What else is new with you?
And just working, teaching, and just trying to be a good brother, learning this new position like we talked about, and understanding the deepness of it, and understanding the profoundness of it as far as leadership goes. And it goes
Yeah.
without saying that it is truly a leadership position. And then knowing that and then seeing that and being in this position for 11 months now, going on 12, 1 year, learned a lot. You're constantly learning, figuring some stuff out. And when you're working with a group of individuals, you have to know what to say, when to say it, and how to say it.
Yeah.
So it's constant evolutionary thing. Been
Yeah.
good. Been good.
That's good. Yeah,
Challenging.
leaders. Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say, leadership in general, can be challenging. You can read it as many of these leadership books as you want, and theorize, but it's the practical application of it, and more so, I think that leadership within nonprofit organizations or volunteer organizations are even more so more challenging than others because there's no leverage, there's no real leverage, in that relationship. Not saying that that is successful leaders hinge the success of your leadership doesn't necessarily hinge upon having leverage, but is definitely a motivator for some to help guide them, to get back onto the organization's track or where the organization is headed. So yeah, kudos to you on that one for sure, because yeah, it's tough in nonprofits for sure, for sure. I've been reflecting on the last couple of episodes and where we've come from, and I'm still excited about all the things that we've been able to do thus far. I forgot exactly when and when we started this thing, but I know we're probably coming up on a year here soon.
Yeah, it's been 11 months. When I was
Yeah.
looking at the videos today, we've been on for 11 months. I think collectively we've gotten, I think I saw something upwards of 5,000 views. Collectively, it was,
Yeah.
we're looking for people to like, share, subscribe. That's the most important thing. But yeah, it's been 11 months, man.
Man.
I think when I first took office, we kind of we got after it, and we've been going and been getting some feedback. I was on a Zoom call with a brother yesterday, and he just said that he's going back in retrospect, right, and looking at some of the episodes, and he says he's starting to catch up on them. And he was just saying how it makes him really think, deep about, how it makes him kind of go really deep dive on masonry. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
it's pretty dope. You know what I mean? I'm glad that we can touch people like that.
Yeah, man, we had some some deep brothers on here talking talking esoterics and looking back on that, and first one with Orlando, which we probably it's probably time for us to circle back with him to see how he's doing and see
He's
what
doing
other
good.
kind of music he's got out.
He dropped
I
some.
think-
He's dropped a few more albums and singles since then. So yeah, it'd be good to have him circle back. He was in the studio last week. So yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, man, it's a busy time just for masonry in general. I think everyone's kind of like at that halfway mark, right? At that in the calendar, getting ready for their grand sessions or their annual communications and whatnot. And it's just a busy time. Kids are out of school now, so competing for time. So this is where we really put that 24-inch gauge to work and balance things as well. So yeah, really busy.
So let me ask you this, man, because I know you've been grinding and you've been dealing with a lot of stuff up the play area. We'll just say that, right? And
Yeah.
so as I thought about that, I was thinking about this last week. How can Masons, not just Prince Hall Masons, let's just say Masons in general, how can Masons be affluent in that situation? How do you think? Have you thought about that? How we could interact and be affluent in that situation and actually maybe quell some of those anxieties, or maybe even, how do you think we can fit into that?
Yeah. I think as we look at, what California has been through in this last year, not just with this, but we look beyond that. We had the fires not too long ago as well. And I think that just as Masons responded to that, is that we can support and be affluent or influential in the same manner, because the organization, what are we really about? We're about extending that olive branch and brotherly love and relief and support. We're all love. So I think that through our actions in supporting, and again, we never bring politics into the lodge. So from that perspective, I think how we impact that is through what we always do. We fall back on who we are, fall back on our character, and we support through those who are in need, right? Those who are in need and being there to help and support, whether that be, providing things or providing access to things. That's what we do. Yeah, that's how I think we can impact that. What do you think?
I just think our presence would actually turn the tide somewhat, right? It's for just for the audience and for context for the audience, like we're talking about the riots in LA and all the rioting that's going on right now. So the question to Trey for myself was, how can Freemasons, not just Prince Hall Masons, any Masons, right, be affluent or influence that situation, either good or bad or indifferent. And so my thoughts on that, as I digress, my thoughts on that is presence. Sometimes the presence gives credence, right? And sometimes just being there helps.
Yeah.
Right. If you just think about a father-child relationship. Every boy wants their dad. So sometimes if their dad is just there, he could be busy, but let's say he's physically there. Sometimes it just makes that big a difference just to have the presence, that person there, or those people there. So I think it's just the presence for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think we can get too deep into the politics.
Yeah.
Being brothers, right? It's just not our realm. It would go against what we actually stand for. Although we value and revere it, but it would go against what we stand for if we actually took a side one way or
Yeah.
another.
Yeah,
So,
we're all just, in this thing called life, trying to figure this journey out together. And I think that, most of the brothers have that same sentiment, in the sense of, not falling to one side or the other, and just, being objective, observers to a point, and understanding that, this is societal norms, right? Unfortunately, it is how it is. But there are things that we can do to assist and help, and to, progress the message of what Freemasonry is, and it's, through our own actions, and how it is that we respond to things like this. Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on.
This platform, man, gives us latitude to speak on things like that. But you said something that was interesting, and I was just telling my class today. Society and societal norms, and as I think about something that James Baldwin said, he said that the very paradox of education, because you talk about teaching and learning and this and this and that. So the very paradox of education is this: as one becomes educated, one begins to examine the society in which he is educated. Now, if you think about the society in which we are educated right now, and as I was talking to my wife this morning, I said, this is the new Jim Crow. I said it's going that way. It's not fully there, right? But there's remnants. There's remnants, and I say that there's a lot of stark differences. But think about the infrastructure and what that was then, and where our political stakes are now, and it's crazy. It's crazy. In 2.5 more years, man, it's crazy.
Well, the question now, since we made that reference to it, is like, okay, so what can we learn? What did we learn, right, from that time that can be applied to today? And what, in hindsight, from those situations or from Jim Crow, that era, how could we look at this or approach this situation differently, whether it be from a societal standpoint, or really, I think it comes down to the individual standpoint. Is right. It's like, it's funny, or not funny. It's ironic, because I think we tend, I say we as in people, tend to be emotional about things, and really, forget the impact that we have within our circles, and it's quite often overlooked. My wife and I were actually talking about this. I said, well, if you feel a certain, and not necessarily about this, but this is just about anything in general, that if you feel a certain way and so strongly about it, it's one thing to argue with someone, or I won't say argue, debate with someone about it. And, then it is to put words to action, right? Because there's ways and things, and that's one of the things that makes this country so great, is that we have the ability to do things and start things and advocate for things and start programs that have a impact, but also serve and align with our morals and values. So I think, going back to the question of how Masons can interact, or how Masons can be impactful or influential, is through initiatives like that. Initiatives like supporting people. And what is it that we do, right? What are our values? What are our characters? What are our morals? What are our ethics? And what better time to show that through crisis?
Yeah, back to your original question, how's it comparable, more or less, right? Paraphrasing. It's because at the end of the Reconstruction in the late 1800s, 1877 to the mid 1960s, and that was the racial segregation. That was the whole Jim Crow era. So
Hmm.
I think, and I feel this right now based on everything that's going on in the political climate that there's racial segregation. You start in last year, or we're in 25. Yeah, so last year, yeah, and then after November, you saw let's get rid of DEI. Let's get rid of this. Let's blot out the history. The Naval Academy has taken Maya Angelou's book off the shelf, which is a travesty, right? Because there are African American students at the Naval Academy, and not just African American students read Maya Angelou books. Let's just be clear. But they took her books off the shelf as far as reading and being able to read and have access to. Jackie Robinson's DOD files were deleted and were later put back on. But it's just we're going back to the 60s. Like we're going in reverse. We're not progressing, we're digressing in that aspect. So that's kind of the parallel. When I
Yeah.
look at all of you want to erase the history, you want to take away the holidays. It's just we're digressing. We're not progressing. Masons
Mm.
can be affluent in that is being those leaders, being on the front lines, doing leadership conferences, bringing men in, making good men better men. And then I want to kind of talk about that too, because we always dance around that, make good men better men. We always tap dance around that. So I want to circle back on it. But yeah, we're digressing.
I think that's a really strong that's really strong language. I understand. I think I understand where you're coming from with that. I would also I think that there are two extremes, and I think for a while it was on the pendulum was on the other side, and now it's swung right to the point where it's a lot of culture shock. And I'm not saying that those programs and history isn't relevant, but at the same time we have to, what is our identity right now, right, as a nation? I think that's really, really important as well, to see it from that perspective, and then what it is that we stand for, because there's a lot of things that weren't just that were changed, that weren't just tied to race specifically, although that is, in my opinion, the tendency of the media to play on that, because that's their job, right? Is to invoke emotions. And I think it's very dangerous that they do that and that happens, because now everything becomes white noise, or everything is seen through that lens specifically, when it's not necessarily true. Right. There's degrees to it. I think as long as there's people and human beings on the face of this earth, there will always be disagreements, and there will always be, in our opinions, injustice happening. But I think that if we are to wait that narrative, I think that is a dangerous road, that's going to bring us somewhere, just as a nation and collectively, that really will lead to regression. Right? That's my opinion on it. Yeah.
I mean, there's some separatist, acts now. We're all kind of going in 9,000 different directions. COVID is start to rear back up again, rear its ugly head again. But I think we're on the, good side of that. But I just kind of anchor on what we are as brothers, right? As brothers, if we were united, let me say that again. If we were united as a collective body, how much power and affluence and influence will we have? Just think about that. If we were collectively united and utilize all of our resources within our circles, how much change could we make in a lot of different political and social circles?
Yeah. Pretty significant, very significant. And I don't think that is really, well, one, some people don't want to see that happen. But I mean, that's just the nature of people, right? Of people, and not a specific group of people, but just people in general. Yeah, we could do something great. The question now is, how do we do that? How do we mobilize? How do we energize? Those efforts that fundamentally change the foundation of what it is that masonry is, or what it is that masonry is. I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
So how do we do that? We can go no further than basic instructions before leaving Earth. The Bible.
Yeah.
Right? The
Yeah.
Bible says, teach a child how, how they should grow and they should never go astray. Paraphrasing again. As we think about that, if we lead a child and teach them how they should grow, they'll never go astray. So when we go back to the question, how do we make good men better men? By giving them tools, principles, and fundamental understandings of what masonry should look like. And oh, by the way, we need to have ethical values and live those principles as well, so that it's not hypocritical. And once we do that, it's contagious. So we teach them the fundamental principles, giving them the working tools, how to utilize the working tools.
Yeah.
Because we talk about these working tools, these metaphorical working tools, but those operative masons utilize those working tools to break out the superfluous corners of the rough stones, right? To smooth out the rough edges, right? To measure our work, as our deputy would say, measure twice, cut once, right? So utilization of these tools, fundamental understanding of that, making these good men better men, building that solid foundation. So when those men go out and they grow into this organization, this fraternity of ours, then they bring in other good men and they teach them. And they bring in other good men and they teach them. Then it becomes a domino effect that we have this 3, 4, 5 generations of men that are being taught the right way how to utilize the working tools.
Yeah. I'm having not deja vu, but I'm having I'm reminiscing on a couple of conversations and we had lectures, and I'll call them lectures, where we got together and we were talking about mental health, specifically men's mental health, right? And how, to me, this is a part of that, right? It's a part of those foundational tools that oftentimes, men, we find these things out later in life, right? And is it because we weren't ready? I don't know. Is it because, we weren't exposed? I don't know. It's just unfortunate that we have access and we don't use that access or leverage that access. To your point about the working tools, right? We have access to this knowledge, right? But do we use it? That's the question. And I think that takes some introspective thought about, oneself and what it is that you believe and what it is that you stand for and how you choose to live your life. And it comes at different times, right? It's like the ebbs and flows, right, of life. And it comes at different times for different folks. They reach their I guess point of enlightenment a little bit, earlier, a little bit later than some. I still haven't figured this thing out, all the way. Still working on balance and but there's so much to be done, right? There's something to be said about just taking a moment and reflecting on oneself and where you're headed and what it is, how it is that you're using these tools, these biblical tools, these working tools, what have you, to improve oneself and become that, that have that butterfly effect on your circle to improve those around you. So, yeah.
Well, I guess to kind of piggyback on that, last month, May, was Mental Health Awareness Month. And how many components of our fraternity recognize May as Mental Health Month? Think about that. Because it starts with, you say we have access to these tools, but the leaders have to put those things out there and say these tools are available. Because you don't know what you don't know, my wife would always say. Right? You don't know what you don't know. So if you don't know the tools are there, and then those societal norms, society tells us, just like we grew up, be tough it out. Men don't cry, and men don't get therapy, and men don't take medication. That's false. That's a false narrative. But again, my original question is, if we make that an awareness within the fraternity, then it grows. And then we get back to that fundamental understanding how to make good men better men. It is the betterment, it is the whole man concept, if you think about it, not just the one aspect. Because I can teach you the ritual, Trey, right? You're a pretty good ritualist. I've seen you do a lot of lectures. You can learn a ritual. Cool. But what about the other aspects of what those words encompass? What's the etymology, again, of those words? What do they encompass? What do they mean? How do we get better? How do we do better?
Yeah.
Right? It's a whole man concept. It's not just one piece. It's hard to keep hearing, well, it's in the ritual. Well, no, it's not. Not really.
I think about these problems. Oh, well, yeah, I'll call it a problem set. I think about these different problem sets, and I think of, I can't help but think about them as systems. What I haven't seen a system that supports that, right? That supports the what we'll call it personal growth, and then we'll divide it, into Masonic growth and spiritual growth in those three different areas. And I think that it's like a you just look for a spark, right? And you gotta tender that fire, give that fire some tinder in order for it to take off and to have that impact. Do you think that the organization has the structure or the systems in place that supports that?
I think the infrastructure is there. Let me rephrase that. I think the talent and understanding is there. The infrastructure can be built,
Yeah.
and that's the most important thing. So I to your point, I go back to what I told my students today. I gave them a few acronyms. One that comes to mind, a good brother of mine, Miguel Lopez, put this in morning affirmation. I believe you had it. I don't know if you remember this acronym. It was peace, the word peace, PEACE. And that acronym is positive energy always creates elevation. The only problem is everybody wants the elevation, but they don't want to do the climb to get to the elevation. So we got to climb. We got to have peace, right? But we have to climb to get to the elevation. And then I also think about every Mason as a tree. And you're probably looking at me kind of crazy, like, what the hell are you talking about, tree? Well, every Mason is a tree. And as I think about a tree and something that I came across about a year and a half ago, it struck me as odd that trees grow in two directions at the same time. And in those two directions, one direction is phototropic and the other one is gravitropic. Now, if we just tackle the gravitropic for a second, that's learning the ritual, breaking out the superfluous corners of the rough stone, utilizing the working tools, understanding the biblical aspects of what we do as brothers. You're going through as you're going through gravity, as the tree's going through gravity, the roots are growing and growing and growing again, growing at the same speed, up and down, phototropic and gravitropic. As it's going through the concrete and it's going downward, it's going through dark, damp, moist conditions.
Mhm.
It's learning. Bumps in the road, literally and figuratively. But what people tend to see is the phototropic of Masons. They see the top end, so to speak, of context.
Yeah.
And so if we can strengthen the gravitropic, the phototropic becomes a little clearer. The branches are bigger and more beautiful and more accessible. Because what happens is when people see the phototropic side and it's dead or it's rotten or it's tainted in any way, then that is a direct reflection on every Mason everywhere.
Yeah, that's fair.
So Masons are trees, gravitropic and phototropic. But we have to be conscientious of that we're growing in two directions at the same time.
Yeah.
Pay credence to the gravitropic. That's where it's tough. That's where it's dark. That's where nobody sees it. The work that you put in, the ethics that we talked about, the ethical values that we talked about, that's where that comes in when nobody sees it. The work that's being done when nobody sees it. The taking care of your family, to understanding, to having financial literacy, which a lot of us didn't get growing up, to talking about mental health, to talking about the tough stuff. That's the gravitropic. The phototropic is being productive citizens as Masons. And then that square and compass takes on a different connotation, meaning it is more respected. Because let's be honest, do you really think that Masonry is as respected as today as it was 40 years ago?
No, I don't. I think to your point, there is taking on a negative connotation or connotation from a couple bad apples or a few bad apples. I would say you should know you by the fruit. They should know you by the fruit that you bear. So I think that to your point, masonry in general isn't. It's almost like this. It's always been a obscure kind of little known thing, almost to the point where some people who are part of the organization really truly don't know what the organization is about. They'll read a couple books and think they have a full understanding without applying those things to really yield the benefits of these things, of these working tools and the lessons to be learned in that. So no, I agree with you. I don't think it is, but to me, that's why it's so important to have standardization, right? Standardization inside the craft. I think that if we have standardization and avoid deviation, then we're growing together. And to your point of the knowledge is there, the structures there. We're talking about mental health, financial literacy, all the responsibilities of a man, within in the confines of your home, right? Like we have some great examples of that within the organization who can, if allowed, right, really move these, I won't even say the craft, right? Move the individual brothers in the right direction at a pace that would ultimately supersede our expectations or exceed our expectations. Sorry, not supersede our expectations, but exceed our expectations. I was, thinking about just a conversation I was having the other day with a couple brothers. They were, we were talking stocks, we were talking, options, we were talking investment strategies, and then we flipped the conversation, to some ritual stuff. And, then we flipped the conversation again to, to the biblical teachings and breaking things down and meanings within the stories. And it was great fellowship, right? When you can have really depth conversations and on so many different subjects. And like, I know for a fact we got brothers out there doing great things. But the ones who are a little bit further behind, yeah, how do we bring them in to bring them ahead, right? I think that's always been the name of the game is how to get ahead. And I think, masonry, regardless of your, ethnicity, right? I think that's what masonry has been designed to do, is to give you access to things that you would typically not normally have access to. Because, I think about this all the time, like, who are my closest friends, right? Who are my closest friends, closest acquaintances, right? And that'll tell you exactly what kind of person you are. And I don't think we often examine ourselves from that perspective to really take inventory of who we are and where it is that we're trying to go and have a vision for our, for our life to align with what God has for us. So yeah.
Yeah, but taking that personal inventory is hard, right? Admitting you're wrong and don't understand some things, sometimes that pride gets in the way, and that's where that mental health, we go right back to that mental health, right? It's just a door that swings backwards and forward. It's gonna hinge back. So it hinges back to this mental health. And we taking that personal inventory of who you are and what your shortcomings are. And I kind of go back to Michael Wilson, my senior deacon, and he always told us, if you remember nothing else I say, remember this: meet one, greet one, and teach one. So that's to your point. How do we do it? Right? Your rhetorical question or your question, how do we do it? Meet one, greet one, and teach one. But teach. That's the key word, right? Teach.
Yeah.
An emphasis on teaching, segueing to learning, parlaying into educating. Meet one, greet one, teach one. Okay. And that's the basic, right? So colloquial, right? Meet one, greet one, teach one. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Ha ha ha, great. That's funny. But no, literally, when you meet a brother, mentor that brother, right? Because what's going to happen, that brother is going to pay that forward.
Yeah.
I tell every brother, every person in the military that I've mentored, they said, well, hey, I got advanced, promoted. I'm in '03 now. I'm in '04, '05. I'm like, okay, the only thing I ask you is just pay it forward. That's it. Nothing. You don't owe me anything.
Yeah.
You don't even need to tell me you're advanced. I'm glad you did. That's a blessing. But now pay it forward. Right. That's the key.
Yeah.
Now knowledge is made to be shared. It's not made to be hoarded. Right. We learn things to share them, not to internalize them.
Yeah.
And knowledge is so broad. That's knowledge of self, knowledge of societal norms, knowledge of books, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of want to jump back a little bit because I want to bring this out publicly, because we always talk about the fellowcraft degree. And what makes me laugh, and I just have to say this, is that brothers learn the 357, don't realize the meaning of the 357. For example, we're doing a podcast, an educational podcast. This is the San Diego Educational Podcast. And one brother put me onto a book called The Trivium. And we were just talking about this last night. The Trivium breaks down the 7 liberal arts of science and tells you exactly where they came from the Socrates and the Aristotle and the biblical understanding. And it breaks you down to give you the fundamental life understanding, biblical understanding, every understanding you can think of on the 7 liberal arts of science, the Trivium. And that Trivium is a set of books, Trivium, Quadrium, a set of books. But the Trivium is the primary one. What I'm saying, I said all that to say this: if we had that fundamental understanding of books like the Trivium to further teach the meaning, because there's a lot of biblical meaning and a lot of meaning in the fellowcraft degree. If we were able to teach that, to a level, you talk about a standardization, not deviation. If we are able to standardize those teachings, how much better will we be if we had a standard here, not here? For example, Robert's Rules of Orders was created.
What Robert's Rules of Order, if I'm not mistaken, was originally for court proceedings, to govern court proceedings, correct?
Correct, but
In
then
Canada,
it morphed into organization. Because,
correct.
right, that was the parlay, but it was meant for the court proceedings and the other organizations how to govern them. That was a form of standardization. Fast forward, for one of the books that we revere, especially when you go to the East, Rules of Order. That's a standard. So that's a set standard. Our Constitution is a set standard, and the words in everyone's Constitution look exactly the same. From
Yeah.
laws to laws, the constitutions look the same. Same thing with the ritual. The rituals in every jurisdiction, in that jurisdiction, look exactly the same. So why is it that 6 lodges will do things 6 different ways?
Well,
Yeah, answer.
You want my? You want my?
Yeah, answer. I'm curious. I mean, I'm trying. Like,
hey.
I have to understand this, right? To
Yeah.
process it, to psychologically process this.
Yeah. Well, I'll say, my opinion on that is that just as, you will read read a book, all right, well, yeah, you'll read a book and you'll take a specific understanding from it. And I'll read the same book, same passages, and I'll take another understanding from it. Does it mean the words change? No, the words didn't change. It's that we are looking at it from our own lived perspective and our own ability to understand what it is that we are reading, if that makes sense.
Let me interject though. Your own perspective. So your own perspective, meaning your view or your vantage point, your own lived experience. Now, when you first came to Masonry, you were hoodwinked. You were in darkness. Your lived experience meant nothing because you came in penniless in your home, in your retired situation. You literally had nothing. Your lived experience didn't come in with you, is the point I'm trying to make. Now, having said that, we have one ritual that's written to standardize how we do business. But if we keep utilizing our lived experience, what happens?
Yeah. Well, to your point there, I understand where you're coming from with that. I will also say that, there's some things you can't take away from someone, no matter what kind of process they go through. Like their habits are their habits, their understanding is their understanding. But to address that, what I believe is that, just like organizations have their own culture, so do lodges. They all have their own culture. So, if we look at it from that perspective, then we understand why there's deviation is because it's a cultural difference. Some brothers, I'll say I've been to some lodges where things are a little bit more stuffy. I've been to some that are a little bit more spiritual. I've been to some that are a little bit more regimented, and depending on how you receive that, they're the same words, same work. But it can change the seriousness of what it is that you are participating in, if that makes sense. And I think that does have a lot to do with why we see such deviation. Example, when you sitting there in any degrees, whether it be, first, second, or third degree, it's supposed to be a sombering, experience. Is it always like that at every lodge? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, right? So is that because they're not following the ritual? No, not necessarily. It's that experience. And then from that, right, what does that candidate learn? Right? Do they, because we're always listening, they're always listening and paying attention. So I think that, that kind of culture has a lot to do with why we see deviation. That's just my opinion.
So the culture in the lodge is affecting deviation.
Oh, yeah.
That's unfortunate because we have to get back to a fundamental understanding. Now, every lodge is going to have a different culture because it's a different building. It's a different set of people.
Yeah.
Granted, right? Cultural differences. So every lodge is going to take on its own individual culture. Got it. But the point is to make sure that we have a fundamental understanding of the same ritual and not misinterpret it. And if we misinterpret it, then we need to clarify our interpretation and get the actual interpretation. and utilize
Hmm.
resources to make sure that our interpretations are aligned with the Bible, which is on the altar.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the most important thing. That's the fundamental thing. We go back to the 24th landmark. I think it's 21st or 24th. I can't remember off the top of my head. But we go back to the landmark and we think about what volume sacred law is. We put our understanding, cultural difference or not, these are the words because these are biblical words. So we do that. We take it back to the biblical understanding, and then it gives it context. So our lived experience kind of, yeah, I get it. We have a culture within our organization, but a fundamental understanding is what I'm trying to push at. I push
Yeah.
towards. We have to put things in context to get a fundamental understanding.
Yeah. That's a challenge
It is.
nonetheless,
Yeah, that's a hill to climb.
yeah, I guess that's the ultimate objective as the lens in which we're looking at it, because it's something that we'd like to see. When we're talking about that, to me, it comes down to governance, right?
Yeah.
How these things are governed, and the how do I say this?
Funny you said governance, but you open
Yeah,
that. Just know you open that can.
I said it for a reason, but yeah, lost my train of thought. Governance, how we might be able to. Oh yeah, governance, because that's where you get the standardization from, right? Because we do have, the thing that governs all lodges. Well, most lodges by jurisdiction. I'll put it that way, by jurisdiction, right? Because every jurisdiction is different. It's its own living and breathing thing, right? Although it falls under the auspices of masonry in general, they're all, they're individual things when you're talking about jurisdictions, which I don't think a lot of people really look at it that way or understand it to be that way. But from what I've seen, is different. It's different for sure. Yeah, governance. So having that structure or that framework in place to have consistent governance, right, is what we're talking about, which could help, right? I won't say solve, but it could help with that standardization of what it is that we're talking about. The work, we'll call it that. Yeah.
Yeah, but our governance is our constitution. That's why I said, I'm glad you opened that can,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. So our governance is our constitution. But as we peer through our constitution, there are things that are not in there. And that's fine, because not every book is written, not every governance or governing laws are written for preciseness, because things change. The society evolves, things change. So we've evolved as a society, and as a fraternity, things have changed. However, what I tell brothers is that they have the power during their sessions to change the Constitution, because they are the governing body of that fraternity, the brother. And they don't understand that they are the governing body. They make the decisions. 2/3 vote, 30 vote will change constitutional laws. So what I was going to say, because I got off course a little bit, is that in our current constitution and in constitutions in general, not just ours, every constitution in general is not all encompassing. For
Yeah.
example, does it say in the constitution right now that memorization is required? It's a rhetorical question, and the answer is no. It doesn't say that. However, going back to your standardization and a deviation, we want to standardize, and that should be standardized. That the expectation of ritualistic work is memorization. That's the expectation, not you. You can read out a book if you have to. Sometimes people are challenged and it just happens. Life happens. But what's the standard? The standard and the level of proficiency required would be the memorization. But understanding the memorization of the work is going back to books like the Trivium and the Bible to understand what you're reading. Not just memorize it, just understand what you're reading. That's the point.
So let me ask you this: which is more important? And there has to be one that's more important than the other. Let me preface it by saying that there has to be one that's more important than the other. Is it the memorization, or is it the application of the ritual?
That's tough, man. It's like asking what came first, the chicken or the egg.
I know. I know.
So I think I've been misquoted. Matter of fact, hell, I have been misquoted as saying that it's okay to read out of the ritual. It's not okay. If you have to, you have to. I can't tell you how life falls or whatever, but that your question, the physical application of the memorization of the ritual, they're both as equally important. They are, and that's a cop out, I know, but there's no real way to answer that outside of what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? You can't.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I think just my personal opinion, I think the application is more important than the memorization, because through the application, I think by default, start to really truly understand what it is that you're reading, right? Or what it is that you're memorizing. And I think that, that is more impactful than just being able to recite something. So yeah, that's what I think on that one. I think naturally, if you're living it and you're doing the work that you are, a byproduct of that is you're going to memorize it because you said it and stood it and studied it for so long, and you're living it that you're now, hey, this is how I am, right? This is a part of my, character, per se. So that's what I guess my opinion is.
So let me read you something that I just put together, right? And
Mhm.
and we talk about, to your very point, we're going to talk about efficiency, because that's essentially what we're talking.
Yeah.
There was 3 points that I was able to glean, in conversing with another brother. It was good to get his input on it. Mastery of the ritual, ability to correctly perform the opening and closing of the lodge, the Greek unfurls, and burial ceremonies, which is a requirement here. Number 2, memorization and delivery. Let me say that again. Memorization and delivery. Precise memorization and articulate delivery of the lectures and charges of the degree. To your point. Number 3, demonstrating an open lodge. For the proficiency piece, a master mason must demonstrate the competency before the members of his lodge, who will affirm through a formal vote, majority vote, of the procedures. Those 3 things are a summation of what we just talked about. So the question is, what is proficiency? And that is what proficiency looks like. Mastery of the ritual, memorization and delivery, demonstration and open lodge. So to the original question, both are as equally important. Understanding being 1A, memorization being 1B, if that's fair.
I would ask, is that from, does the Constitution say that?
The Constitution does not say that.
Yeah.
But
So
it is up to a person in specifically in this position to be able to standardize that,
yeah, that's fair.
right? The Constitution does not say it, but what did I say a few minutes ago? The governance. When you have your annual session, that's the governance of your organization. That's where the changes are made. That's where the laws are made, right? And
Yeah.
that's where the Grand Master is a not, and this is no disrespect to any Grand Master. During that session, the Grand Master is a brother. The craft has the power at Grand Lodge. When you
Mhm.
go to your annual session, when they leave the session, the prerogative of the Grand Master governs. Now he's still the Grand Master in any way, shape, or form. Don't ever get that twisted. But the brothers have a lot more fundamental power in governance than they think they do. They just don't understand how to use it, but they really don't look at the Constitution.
Mm. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of brothers out there who know, they're just not trying to ruffle feathers,
Well, again, you have to decide if you're going to do that or not. But you have to have ethical values, have
Yeah.
morals, right? You
Yeah.
have some integrity, and sometimes you will be the villain, and you will wear black, and you will be
Yeah.
ostracized. If we think about the people that have made changes in our society and in history, some of our pillars, the stalwarts, they were outcast. But
Yeah.
because of they were steadfast in their beliefs, we're able to have podcasts, and we're
Yeah.
able to do things that we do now because people stood up for us and put themselves out there. They were selfless leaders. They were servant leaders. They were selfless, not selfish.
Yeah.
And so again, I kind of go back to those things. What is proficiency? And I just want to kind of go on public record to the world as saying these things constitute proficiency, not reading out of the ritual. So that false narrative is a false narrative. Let me be clear on that. All right. I understand the platform we have. So that false narrative is a false narrative.
Yeah. Let me ask you this then. Why do you think that narrative has become just that, a narrative?
We get into this crab in a barrel effect, right? Where we think we want something that we don't understand what it really entails. If you understand that, I think we try to get something that we really don't understand what it entails.
Yeah.
Because if it's given to you, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
That's why that
Mm.
happens.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree. I can't. Yeah.
We chase the wrong things. We chase the wrong things. I ask brothers all the time. I ask people all the time, what's your why? Dr. Eric Thomas has read his book, UOU. Great read. And then out there, go get that book, You Owe You by Dr. Eric Thomas. It's a self-help book. But I digress. The one thing he says in that is the most profound thing in that book. He says, just knowing your why. Your why has to be greater than everything else to keep you going.
Yeah.
Because when it gets dark, people turn their back on you. Your why is the one thing that's going to keep you going. And it's going to make you go forward, irrespective of whatever else is going on. I'll use myself as an example. Taking the certification twice, failed it twice. My why is to pass that certification. My why is because that certification will open up other doors and put me in different circles to teach this knowledge that I have in my head, but I have to get through the certification first. That's my why. My wanting to be in these other circles to teach project management at higher education, right? To at the prisons, to teach project management, to give brothers and people and young men and women fundamental skills when they get out of incarceration. Because I teach at a military jail right now. So that's my why. So whatever happens, I failed the test. The certification test twice. Doesn't matter. My why is going to have me pass the test in August.
Yeah.
That's my why. So again, I just spoke it into existence publicly to the world. Your why has to be stronger than everything else.
Yeah.
If your why is stronger than everything else, it's going to put you past doubt. It's going to put you past everything that you could possibly think of.
Yeah.
All the hate, the envy, all the jealousy, all the everything, right? Self-doubt is the biggest thing because sometimes we're our own worst enemies.
Yeah. I think to your point there about, wanting something without really working for it, because that's really what we're talking about.
Microwave generation.
Yeah. It is, isn't that so true about, everything, right? In life in general, not just about, the craft specifically. And I think that, to your point, there's lots of people who write about this and talk about this, and there's tremendous literature on self-help, we'll call it that. Find it interesting that, we're just always default back to that human nature, to wanting something easy. Even now, as we look at, just society in general, we all got soft. I don't care who you are. Maybe David Goggins is the only dude out there who's cracked the code or something like that. But we just get comfortable with everything that we have and where we're at in life in general, and become content with the knowledge that we've gained, to the point where, we believe we know something that we really truly don't even, can begin to really understand. And I think that just plays out tenfold in masonry, specifically when there are, titles or other things, which I really haven't quite figured out. I haven't quite figured out the cost of benefit on that, or the cost of benefit on that from a legit, like, my personal perspective. Like, what would be my why for doing that thing, right? Because life is too short. Life is too short to chase things that are empty. I definitely want to spend my time, the most precious thing I have, building things that are of value, not only to, my family, but to society. And if I'm not in a position to do that, then, you're not ready for the we're not ready for the responsibility. But not a lot of people think about it like that. It's an ego. Let's call it what it is. It's an ego thing, right? And it takes a lot of examination to realize that about oneself. I was telling my wife this about, my decision about my career path right now to retire. And I had a aha moment where I was like, well, True, what are you trying to do? What do you want? What is stopping you, or what is really the heartache? And my realization was that it was my ego. It was, hey, you know what? Just to say I did it, just because I can, right? It wasn't to help somebody or to progress something or to, contribute to something. It was purely ego. And that's when I realized, I was like, well, hey man, that's not who you are. That's not your character. That's not who you are as an individual. That's not who you are as a leader. So therefore, you need to stay in character, stay within your sphere. But it took a lot, man. It took a lot to have that conversation, that real conversation with myself, to say, enough is enough. Like, you're sacrificing the fruits of your labor for something that is empty.
Yeah, That's extremely deep, but here's what I want you to do because I'm gonna take you right back. You talk about the tools and principles and fundamentals of masonry, and you said that you struggle with your ego. I want you right now, and if your feet stink, then nobody's in the room with you. I want you to reach down and take off your left shoe and tell me what that takes you back to. Reach down
Yeah.
right now, physically,
Yeah.
physical adaptation. Take off your left shoe.
Oh, I got it off.
And
look.
what does that? I got you. What does that take you back to? The first degree, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Humble.
Humble.
Nothing.
We
Yeah.
came in with nothing. I said that earlier, right? We talked about lived experience. I used that example for a reason. We came in with nothing. We were humble. The first thing we learned, the first lesson, humility.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, as a person with multiple college degrees, I constantly find ways to improve. I never stagnate where I'm at or get comfortable on my laurels, let my rest on my laurels, so to speak. And always learn more. There's always somebody smarter than you. There's always things to learn and progress and do more.
Yeah.
We have to collectively have that understanding your why, being humble and moving forward and always just be lifetime learners. If we all get to that, then the egos are out of the window. Because you asked about the risk reward benefits of these positions. There's none. It's a volunteer organization. There's more risk than rewards. My wife tells me all the time, joking, half serious, well, 3/4 serious, that Masonry doesn't pay the mortgage. So well, you're right. That it doesn't. It absolutely does. So again, those risk rewards, more risk than rewards. And we just got to put things in perspective. But for ourselves, an internal check is going back to just take something as simple, taking off your left shoe and remembering that first degree and that foundation when you were put in the northeast corner. Once we get back to that, it gives us a level of humility, right? Remember, we had Damian Jack on. He says, I said, we're all on a level. We talked about being on a level. He said, yeah, we're all on a level, but we're on different levels. But we got to get back to being on the levels. Whatever that level looks like, we got to get back to being on the level. And the way we do that is go back to degree 1. Because I know plenty of Grand Inspectors Generals, 33rd degree Masons and above, have sovereign Grand Inspectors Generals, but they couldn't have got step 33 without step 1.
Yeah.
The great tray is quiet. Wow.
Hey, look, I'm just taking it in, letting the words resonate and let the words, settle on the ears out there, because you're right. Step 1, humble thyself, Yeah, it's a real battle every single day. I don't think anyone is above the trials of life and the emotions of life. Yeah, it get anybody for sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get in your own way. You get to your point. We always constantly got to remember that why. Why am I sacrificing this time to do whatever that thing is? This has been a good one, man. It's been good.
It has. It certainly has. Really has. So I mean, we're gonna definitely sign it off there, and then we'll pick it back up in a few weeks, man. But just want the audience to take this episode to heart, brothers and non-brothers alike, mostly brothers that watch this. Take this episode to heart. Go back to the first degree, understanding that we all struggle with our own egos and self-doubt, right? Trey and I both gave you examples of our personal lives and where we struggled. Just do us that favor, like, share, and subscribe once this is uploaded to YouTube, and then we'll see you all in a few weeks. Any words, Trey, before we sign off?
Hey, no, I'll always appreciate y'all entertaining us. Hopefully you enjoyed the conversation and got something out of it. Yeah, that's what this forum is for us just to be us and give you our opinions and just have real conversations. That's all it is. So.
All right, man. Peace out, brothers. Y'all be safe. I'll see y'all soon this session. Trey, go ahead and stay on.
All right, now.